Hi everyone, welcome to MKT510 Customer Behaviour, being conducted by Dr. David Gray from Sturt University. Just a couple of things. Initially, just about myself. I'm an adjunct associate professor with Charles Sturt. A little bit about background. I've got a PhD in marketing from the University of New South Wales and published over 50 academic articles and conference papers. Many of those journal articles are in leading international journals. And I've been working in academia now for about 15 years. Prior to academia, I ran my own management training business and had a number of senior marketing roles in industry. So in this short video, I just wanted to have a quick rundown of the study schedule and the assessment items and expectations that we have for you as participants in this course. If we have a look at the study schedule, you can see there's 12 sessions running from week 1, which was last week, from the 13th of November through to week 12, which is starting the 29th of January. There are 4 assessment items, and I'll go over each of the assessment items in detail a little bit later. Firstly, last week we had a look at an introduction to consumer behaviour. This week we're studying some aspects of culture, and next week on the 27th we're looking at social class, followed by reference groups. And in week 5, we're looking at needs, individual needs, motivations, and consumer behaviour, followed by personality and self-concept. In the middle, from the 23rd of December, from the 23rd of December to Friday the 29th, there's a mid-semester break, and we come back on the 1st of January, looking at the topics of consumer perception. In week 9, learning and consumer involvement. Week 10, consumer attitudes. Week 11, consumer decision-making and consumption experiences. And finally, in week 12, we round up with social change and the diffusion of innovation. So you can see there's a lot of areas to cover in a fairly short period of time. But I hope it's interesting as we go through the process. I hope you find it interesting and that you come out with a heightened sense of what we really mean by customer behaviour. So now I'd like to have a look at the detail of the assessment items. And the first thing I'd like to focus on is academic conduct and expectations. And so here, one of the first things is to ensure that you acknowledge the work of others in your assignments and other assessable work. And this comes down to the whole issue of plagiarism. And so you'll find that all of the 4 assessment items in this course need to be run through Turnitin. And this is a way to check your own assessments using a similarity score, so you can check to make sure that you haven't inadvertently not recognised or acknowledged the work of others. Also, you need to make sure that you don't knowingly allow others to use your own work, so there's no copying. And you report honestly the findings of your study and research. Of course, there's no examinations. This whole course is run by a series of assessments, and there's no exam at the end. Let's have a little bit more detailed look at the assessment. So as I said, there are 4 assessment items. The first one is a personal consumer audit worth 10%, due on the 30th of November. Assessment 2 is having a look at the social and cultural aspects of consumer decision making, and that's worth 30% and due on the 22nd of December. The third assignment is really called Highlights and Participation. The whole thing is really about participation. This is getting you engaged and reading some of the academic literature to help you build up your theoretical knowledge of the subject. The final report for Highlights and Participation is due on the 12th of January. The last assignment, which is the major assignment worth 40%, it's looking at the individual aspects of decision making. So decision making as it relates to individuals, it's due on the 29th of January. So firstly, let's have a look at assessment 1, covering the personal consumer audit. This assessment is worth 10%. As I said, it's due on the 30th of November. It's not that long. It's about 700. It is exactly 750 words. In terms of submission of the assignment, you submit the assignment through East Online, and you also submit the assignment to the discussion board and through Turnitin. So the task in week 1. Basically, you post a message on the discussion board, which you would have already done now, just identifying who you are and what you're going to do when you finish your degree. Step 2 runs from weeks 1 to week 3, and this is your personal audit. So the idea here is you define your consumer decision-making behaviour and using at least 5 other academic resources, academic journals, etc. Please, no use of WikiLeaks or general websites. These websites are banned from all your assignments. The personal audit is to look at how you make your decisions, consumer decisions, in regard to your mobile phone, your university, and your choice of your favourite restaurant. So you need to dig deeper in terms of how you make your decisions in this, and how your purchase process differs to someone else that you know. Right? So what are the differences between you and someone else in terms of how you decide to purchase these 3 items? So, and I think the idea is that you go through and you read some of the early work in the textbook, and just see how these early consumer behaviour concepts apply to your decision-making process. That's from weeks 1 to 3, and at the end of week 3, you submit the completed assessment via East and Turnitin. Okay, so basically why we want you to do this assignment is just to start to engage with the subject, get to know your fellow students, and just to start to think about how to apply your understanding of consumer behaviour to situations that you really understand. The marking criteria for all of these assignments are set out on Interact 2 under the assessment criteria, but also in the unit outline as well. So you'll see that the marking criteria for assessment 1, there are 4 marking criteria. The first one relates to theory, second one relates to application, third one referencing, and the fourth one presentation. And this is pretty typical of many of the assessment items that we have. So you'll find that referencing skills and presentation usually account for about 20% of the marks. Most of the marks come from the analysis and the application. And here we've shown you what it takes to get a high distinction versus a pass or a failure, and we've allocated the marks accordingly. So when we mark your assessments, they'll be marked according to this rubric. The presentation format for this assignment is to obviously you have a title page with the subject details, assessment number and topic, your name, and your student ID number. Then define consumer behaviour, present the examples which you were going to talk about, and incorporate consumer behaviour theory and assess against your own and other students' behaviour. Again, as we said, the submission requirements are East and Turnitin by 5 p.m. on the due date. Now, everyone is required to submit by East, and the reason for doing this is because the computer systems of the university are set up so that we can provide you with feedback in a fairly timely basis. If you do not submit through East, it's going to take a long time for you to get your feedback. So that's the first assignment. As I said, that's due at the end of next week, actually, or it's due pretty soon next week. Assessment item 2. Here we're looking at consumers as social beings. It's worth 30%. It's due on the 22nd of December. The submission method is East and Turnitin. So the task is basically social influences impact your product and brand purchase decisions at all stages of the consumer decision process. So there are a couple of questions which we would like you to answer. Basically, these questions are: you have to identify at least 2 social influences that are relevant to consumers of your firm or the firm that you want to work for. So, choose one product or service if more than one is offered by your company, and analyze the social influences which refer to that particular firm. So we want to know about, if you pick two of those influences, it could be culture or social class, could be social class or reference groups. It's up to you. Second is draw in the theories in chapters 2 to 4 to discuss how marketeers in your firm can apply this understanding to improve your marketing strategies. There are some hints there to help you improve your assessment. Remember, the length of the assessment is 2,000 words plus or minus 5%. Okay, so we don't want you writing 3,000 words or 3,500 words. We're looking for 2,000 words plus or minus 5%. So the rationale is we want to make sure that you start to be able to analyze the buyer decision process in regard to these social influences, and so that you can evaluate a variety of external factors, and you can demonstrate a theoretical understanding, and you can understand how these social influences influence marketing and management actions of a firm. Now, the marketing criteria are very straightforward. They're laid out. So there's critical analysis skills. We look at your application, the implications, the quality of your examples, your referencing skills, and also your ability to present. When we talk about presentation, so to fit the high distinction mark for presentation, we're talking about being able to show a polished and imaginative approach to the topic. In terms of what we expect for presentation, you need to make sure that you present a brief introduction and no more than 100 words. You can use the essay format. However, you can use headings and subheadings, charts and figures are also allowed. So okay, the assessment is your opinion, but it needs to be supported by evidence from respectable and reliable sources, expressed in your own words and fully referenced as to the source of ideas, facts and quotations. So we want you to use Times Roman, 12-point font, 2.5 centimetre margins, and single spacing, no 1.5 spacing, no double spacing, please. Use Turnitin to check against the aspects of plagiarism. Now, you can submit to Turnitin as many times as you like up until the time that your assignment is due. Also, you need to have a brief conclusion, no more than 150 words. And you need, in terms of references, you need to use the APA guide style of referencing. So we want to see proper referencing. please, no use of Wikipedia or any of these other generic sites. Okay, so I think that covers assessment 2. Assessment 3. Assessment 3 is essentially about participation, and it's worth 20%. The final submission is due by the 12th of January. So the way it works is that between weeks 3 and 8, each of you will submit a summary of an academic journal article that you have read during the relevant week. And your summary must be limited to exactly 250 words. You can use bullet points to cover the summary. So when you've completed your summary, you post it on the discussion board. All of you will post on the discussion board, and I'd like to see some engagement between all of you about the articles which have been published. So at the end of week 8, after the end of week 8, then you cut and paste all of your articles and the kind of responses which you've been generating from week to week. In other words, your level of participation in this exercise. You post all those responses plus your 250 word summary of each article into a Word document, and then you submit that through East and through, or Turnitin first and then through East. Now there's a whole series of articles identified here, journals, which have been identified here, which you can select from. There's about 20 or 30 journals, and these are the best marketing and the best consumer behavior journals on the marketplace. And so you can select all your articles from any one of these for the as you go through from weeks 3 to 8. So the rationale for this is we really want you to think about developing your critical thinking and collaborative learning skills. Okay, so it provides us an opportunity to see how you've engaged with the theory and the concepts behind it, because consumer behavior, customer behavior in general, is a fairly complex area, and as you'll see from this week when you're looking at culture, it's a hugely complex area. So we want you to know what the literature says. There are 3 major criteria: your theoretical skills, your communication skills, and your participation in the subject. So remember, this 20% participation mark results from the kind of comments, the critique, the questions you've asked, the suggestions you've made during the 6 discussion board sessions from weeks 3 to 8. So if you haven't participated, for example, you've just posted your articles into the discussion board and then submitted them at the end of week 8, and you haven't participated in the discussion, then you'll get 0 for this. Presentation, pretty straightforward, a title page with the subject details. Then you submit each week to the discussion forum, and then cut and paste all the responses at the end of 6 weeks into a Word document submitted to Turnitin and East. So make sure you follow the APA referencing guide and submit to Turnitin. The final assessment is worth 40%. It's due on the 29th of January. It's 3,500 words plus or minus 5%, and the submission method is East Online plus Turnitin, or Turnitin first to check the similarity rating, and then through East Online. The task is to look at the individual factors which influence decision making of consumer needs. So looking at needs, motivations, personality, consumer perception, learning, involvement, etc. So you need to identify at least 2 individual influences that are relevant to consumers. Number 2 is to show how those individual influences should be considered during the decision-making process, and having a look at chapters 10 and 11, and draw on the theories that you've learned during chapters 5 to 11 to show how these individual factors, these individual influences affect consumer decision-making and how they influence marketing strategies. So there are some hints there to help you through the process. So the marking criteria, you can see here, there's critical analysis skills, application, implications, quality of your examples, your referencing skills, and also presentation. So in order to get a high distinction, for example, in relation to critical analysis skills, you need to show strong evidence of independent investigation, questioning and analysis. Independently takes and understands multiple perspectives, and through these can provide an insightful and exhaustive critical discussion of the relevant issues. And so you can see the marks for each area. So you can see for critical analysis skills, the values were 20%. For the application of theories, 20%, implications, 20%, the examples, 20%, and referencing and presentation are worth 10% each. In terms of how you present this assessment, introduction, 150 words. It's the same procedure that applies to assignment 2. So you can use headings, you can use subheadings. Make sure that you use Times Roman 12-point font. You need to include a conclusion. And no Wikipedia sources. Remember that not included in the word count is the introduction, conclusion, references, and tables. So the 3,500 words just relates to the body of the assessment. And then on the due date, you submit to Turnitin and East by 5 p.m. on the due date. Now for the details, you can find these details in the subject outline, and any questions, you can bring them up during the discussion session each week that we have. Okay, look, I think that's all I wanted to talk about in relation to the unit so far, and I'll see you all during the next discussion session on Adobe Connect. Thanks a great deal.